I'd like to welcome you to the Stockbridge Bowl Stewardship Commission meeting on Friday, November 19th at 8 a.m. Thank you for coming. And I'd like to open the meeting, and I thank you all for coming. Could we approve the minutes from 10/15/21 that I sent to everyone? Any corrections, any changes?
Move that we accept the minutes as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So motion carries. All right. So on the agenda, just a couple of things, and we'd like to go over the Stockbridge Watershed Management Memorandum document from May 19th. And I sent all of you electronic copy, and Roxanne had given hard copies to us. So to go over it, I guess the purpose of this was a history of different studies that were done. And hopefully from this memorandum, we can get our ideas, our goals, and work towards making a lake management plan. And in that, we would invite other stakeholders, GZA, SBA, ComCon, the select board, and we could then have a living document. And it wouldn't happen immediately, but we could work towards that, and we would do it democratically. So to start, did everyone read over the document?
Oh.
I have not completely, no.
Okay, because we had it on the agenda last month, pushed it out.
Can I keep it?
All right, I think we should.
Yeah, it's electronic, so we can get more.
Because Roxanne gave it to us in
Yeah, okay.
September, and we then put it on the meeting for October. It is now November. So we'll go forth with the people that have read it over. Charlie, do you have any comments, any input? We can't hear you.
You're muted.
Yeah, that's probably better for everybody, but nevertheless, I'll unmute myself. So the basic idea is I'm very pleased with this memorandum, and that's what it is, a memorandum. And basically, I would categorize it as having three separate components to it. First of all, it has a historical review, which I think is very good. It starts with Ludlam's 1971 study. It goes to the Lycott study of 1991. It deals with the Fugro study. It looks at various reviews of the snail. It looks at GZA studies related to dredging, the outlet, the drain, that drawdown pipe. It talks about that. Then we have the interfluve watershed study. That's the historical stuff. They move along with that. I have a lot of comments about that. The second aspect of it is a presentation of the existing current scientific data and knowledge about the lake insofar as we have it. This is the current review of what the current science is. And then there are a number of management strategies outlined to us, or tactics, you will. We're the ones that develop the strategy. The tactics are outlined with their pros and cons and things like that. So I think we have a very nice document to start with. But what I would say is if I was going to make any kind of criticisms of it, and I do think it's a really good memorandum and a good start. My criticisms of it would be that, well, I don't know if I would even call them criticism, but my comments about it would be that, first of all, it's an intensely complicated bit of information. And in order for us to go on as a commission responsibly to deal with this, we all need to read it. I mean, we really have to know this document if we're going to move forward on a lake management plan. We just can't pass this off on the town of Stockbridge without having done our due diligence about this. And I think that it's something that is difficult. It's going to be very difficult. And I'm going to even suggest that in reading it, it's going to be worthwhile, at least for a lot of us, to have read the historical documents that they refer to, which is an even greater and more intensive read, but it's very enlightening to do that. And then we also need to get up to speed in I don't mean that everybody has to do this, but if you figure that only some of us study the science that they're presenting to us and in an attempt to understand it, only those few of us who do that will have an effective voice on the commission. And, you know, so if I go ahead and I read something and I say something about it, my voice becomes unduly influential in the commission. You know, and I don't think that that's appropriate. I think the town has a lot of different points of view that my voice won't cover. And I think it is important for all of us as delegates. See, this is what I think was really Roxanne's very good idea, is to form this commission with different, you have the blind man and the elephant. You know, one person says the elephant is the tail, one person says the elephant is a trunk. But unless you get the whole group of people together to describe the elephant, you don't know what the elephant is. You just have an individual thing. And my take on the elephant is just going to come from my particular point of view. So I'm really encouraging us to go forward. I would suggest a strategy looking at this memorandum. Okay, they suggest a strategy. They tell us, review this, discuss it, and then bring them back in so that we can ask them our questions and really do it in an intelligent way. If we just want to let them go forward and recommend things, what we're going to be doing here is relying on their particular point of view, which is good. I mean, I'm very happy with Bob Kortman's analysis on some levels and with Chris Maines and GCAs in particular. But I think that if we're going to have any kind of dialogue with them that's meaningful and responsible for the town, we really have to know what we're talking about. And so I would suggest to us that what we have to first do is for the next meeting, when we really discuss this, we should have all done our homework. And we can do it in sections, I believe. I think the first section is a historical review. I think that I would suggest at our next meeting, we have a 2-hour meeting. It needs more than an hour. We can't just do it in an hour. A 2-hour meeting that all of us will have read at least the memorandum summary of the review. And then each of us will have questions. I have questions about this. I don't understand some of the things in it. And we'll be able to then pose them through Jamie or I'll be happy to talk to Chris Maine and Bob Kortman, but I think Jamie might be a good one to do it too. Pose some questions about this for them so that we can move on to the next level, which would be understanding the existing science. And after we do, that would be the next meeting, another 2-hour meeting where we've all done our homework, looking at the science, and then we would accumulate questions, and then we ask them the questions, and we understand that. And then the third thing is to look at the management strategies that they're recommending to us and see what we think about the pros and cons, because each thing has a thing. So for example, just simple management strategies. You know, this guy Wetzel, in I think 1994, he was a doctor from Alabama of ecology or something, I forget what he was. But he came up and he said that we had a lot of external loading of phosphorus. He recommended revising the sewer system to accommodate the southern part of the lake. And I think that was done about that time. And I believe, and Mike Buffoni, you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but they put in the sewer line. And I think that that's obstructing some of the outflow of the lake, isn't it? I don't know.
No, the sewer main doesn't have any bearing on it.
Okay, so good. I'm glad, but still. The idea is then we did all right, I'll do another one. We did a $1.2 million diversion channel. And then it didn't work out because there was studies done on drawdowns at UMass and things like that, where, that they told us we couldn't do the drawdown anymore. And then the snail came in as another idea, that even further. But if we had had an active communication system with UMass, we would have known from talking to those people that they were working on this already, and we would have sniffed this out and not spent all that money on that project. So what I'd like to look at here is to get us so that we're so current with this, that we can be in touch with things so that we can anticipate things. And the last thing I'm going to say, and I'll keep my mouth shut after that, at least in terms of saying what I think about it now until you guys do, but is that the studies that were done, I'm not sure about Ludlam's 1971 study, but the LICA study, the Fugro study, the GZA studies, they were all done because some people had certain issues, let's say, for example, with Myriophyllum spiccatum, the Eurasian milfoil. They were concerned about weeds, and so consequently, the study identified weeds as the major problem. Now, that was a fait accompli because the study was done with the initial presumption that that was the major problem. Now, if we had done a study on cold water fishing habitats, if we had had a study done on that, we might have an entirely different take on the lake. We don't have, all of the stuff I don't see, I'm sure some people are interested in the fishing habitats. We don't have a single study done focusing on cold water fishing habitats. So what I'm just trying to say here is keep in mind when we do the historical review that the basis of these reviews, the impetus to do them was certain kinds of concerns. And so that's why they found these things. I think there were other concerns, and I'm hoping that one of the things that we're going to do here is engender from the community some additional concerns so that we can start to identify where our historical and current scientific information is deficient because we really haven't looked at those concerns.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else want to speak?
Well, I was going to add what Charlie was saying. I mean, this is a great document. Historically, I learned quite a bit just reading it backwards. I was taken by the various different conclusions to the studies. Some conclusions giving exogenous phosphates as the major culprit for the milfoil, some not. So these controversies are probably the things that we probably should key in on. As a committee, I think we have the opportunity and the responsibility to make a plan for going forward and keeping the pond healthy. And healthiness comes not only in cold water and the ability to trouts to exist, but also in making sure that it's a recreational lake and that we're able to manage the growth around the lake. So I think it becomes a multifactorial thing. I mean, how do we get other committees involved? We're probably going to have to involve other aspects of the management of the town of Stockbridge, Concom for one. I think Charlie is right. I think we should probably have a longer meeting because we probably want to have more input from different aspects of it so that we don't get too involved in a tunnel vision. And so we get a broad picture. And yeah, I would be in agreement to having a 2-hour meeting with people involved. And maybe, Jamie, you could think about who you'd like to invite and give them the opportunity to have read this document and to have some thoughts about how to involve themselves in making our goal.
Jim, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Regarding Dr. Kenny's point about trying to do a full review of all these different studies, Dr. Kenny and others, do you recommend that we just look at the summary, or is there a mechanism where we can pull all these documents together into like one area so it's easier for all of us to go back and do our homework? Because I know I've looked at certain studies, even dating back to the cyanobacteria, things are kind of like all over the place. So it'd be great to have everything together so we can go back and look at all the historicals, or do you recommend just kind of doing the summary? Because I think it is incumbent upon all of us to kind of put all our information together and kind of understand the history, but I don't have all those documents sitting in front of me per se. They're kind of like all over the place. So it'd be nice to kind of inventory, kind of get them all together for the board members so we can just sit down and just go through it all. Thank you.
Jim, I sent an electronic copy to the commission, so you should have it. It should be a stack of papers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Look at all these studies. You need the rest of your life. They're probably stacked up like this. I mean, they're 2 inches thick each one. So I think this is a good document
Right.
to use.
Yeah, and I have to say, I agree with the idea that we do need a longer meeting. We probably need at least a 2-hour meeting to be able to go over this. I would suggest focusing on the strategies that are proposed and looking at where do we want to go from here. Historically, we all need to review these, and a lot of us have read them, and I've read some of them quite a while ago. So they're not necessarily fresh in my mind, but as John said, there were different focuses, and Charlie also pointed this out, that the focus at any different point in time, they were different, and there were some different conclusions that came to. I think what we need to focus on is the here and now, and where are we now? What are the current conditions, and what are our current concerns? Michael?
Agreed, Michael? And then Denny. Michael, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just took a quick look at that document, and I can see that the information that you're working with is based on a study of the bowl itself. And there has been some work done on the watershed. Okay, the watershed being all the land that drains into, where the water comes from.
Right.
And I think that to avoid repeating the old path, we have to look more holistically at the bowl as part of its watershed. And just analyzing the bowl itself and, the mouths of the various tributaries where they enter the bowl, which is not, I know you've gone beyond that, but just for sake of argument, is denying access to vital information going forward. And I think that there needs to be a holistic consideration, as I said, what the sources are of the water, okay? How is water being collected naturally? How is it traveling? And what impact does this have? And also volumes. You need to take a look at volumes. And most seriously, we need to take a look at the bedrock geology, which is cited in that report. We've been kind of operating blind as if we didn't understand what the bedrock geology of that part of the town is. It is documented, it is mapped, it is a calcareous karst structure under there. And, I'm getting right over my head talking about geology, but this committee needs to understand how water moves through karst formation geology, because that's what's going on up there, okay? You've got a unique geology in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts happening here, okay, because of this calcareous bedrock. And yet we're thinking in terms of watershed flow, which is characteristic by most of the rest of Massachusetts. So we're trying to do something with we've got the wrong model. And so that's what I'm emphasizing here, is just take a walk around the lake sometime. Look at the white rock on, the western shore. Then walk around and look at the white rock on the eastern shore, by Mackinac. It's all calcareous. The big difference with calcareous bedrock is that water moves through regular granitic bedrock or whatever through fracture lines, okay, where there have been cracks. with calcareous bedrock, it's dissolution channels. So the water gets through, and then because of the calcareous rock dissolves with water, it forms tubes. So that's where you get your cave structures. That's why we have these amazing springs in this line along, from the base of Monument to Housatonic, the springs that drive the paper companies down there. It's all part of a calcareous formation. And the bowl is a lot of the water that's in the bowl is coming into the bowl through these springs. Take the Highland Spring, 80 gallons a minute coming straight up out of the ground. Look at the old Hill Water Company spring on the other side of Rattlesnake. I don't know, 40 gallons a minute? You got to go up and see it. Go around the bowl to, look at the water coming off the Tanglewood property. Look what's happening at the Gould Meadow, these surges of water, which nobody's able to explain. It's totally explainable if you understand what's going on in the bedrock. And anyway, I can keep going for a long time. I think the best example I've seen lately is the source that comes in, through Gould Meadow. It's a lot of work. The town's doing a lot of work on Gould Meadow. There's a brook coming down there. Where's that brook coming from? Well, look, it's coming from a really productive spring with no watershed behind it. It's coming, where's that water coming from? What kind of activities are going on where that water is coming from? And the final question is, if this region of the town, this is the most serious challenge before this board, in my opinion. If this watershed is interconnected by tubular underground flows, is there a connection between the bowl and Lake Everett?
What's the elevation?
Pretty big. But I don't think you've got the information there that you need to work from.
Well,
I think you need to understand, you need to have somebody, a geologist, a hydrogeologist, somebody interpreting what's going on here.
Thank you, Denny. Go ahead.
Michael.
Denny?
And then I know Michael.
I just have a quick comment. Sorry,
Sorry.
Michael. But Denny, just what we're working on here is trying to produce a lake management and watershed management plan. So the intention of this plan is to also include the watershed. So clearly they've mentioned the bedrock geology. So down the road, but we're in the beginning stages of trying to pull this together and create a document, but it will cover the watershed, just so you can feel a little more comfortable with it.
And
Can
then
I ask a quick question?
Yes, and then Michael gets, go ahead.
Denny, would you, I know, the lake is a hard water lake. So that means that calcium is in the lake. Obviously, it flows out through the outlet, but there must be a source of calcium that brings the calcium into the lake. Do you think that Interflu, for example, has done a watershed study involving sediment primarily, but do you think a surficial study looking at the calcium loading through the superficial tributaries would, and let's say analysis of some of the sediment would help us understand how much potentially there is of this underground channels? And I understand the underground channels, it allows for watershed contributions that may go against what you, or may come from places that you don't suspect.
Right.
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm way over my head, Charlie, but I mean, that's basically what I'm saying. If we are looking at data coming from stream flow, which, inputs from stream flow, without understanding that in the water diet of the watershed and of the pond itself, we're not including what's coming in through springs that are in the lake itself, and maybe exiting the lake through tubular structures. We're not getting the full picture, and of where why the lake is so hard. We're getting part of it, but not all of it.
Thank you.
Did Michael want to, I had a comment, but I think Michael should have.
Thank you for waiting, Michael.
Yes, good morning, everybody. The gentleman who was just speaking, I have to apologize to you. What is your name?
My name?
Yes.
Danny Alsop, A-L-S-O-P. I'm at 3 Main Street in Stockbridge, sorry.
All right, but, all right. What I wanted to get to is I think that we're going about this a little bit backwards. And I think we're jumping into specifics where I think we have to actually tone it down and come out with an outline, not specifics and scientific and reading all these things. I think this report that we got gave everybody a really good general view of the past reports, because I've read all the past reports and I read this, and it really gives us, for those that really can't read all these other documents, a good review and a starting place. But we're now faced with a whole different set of cards as to a plan. And the idea of the lake management plan is going forward. What do we want to see happen with the lake? That is a meeting. We had a meeting yesterday that Roxanne was at with NHESP. And it's very important for us to look at where we want to go from this point on. All the sediment, all this and all that can be put in, but that's already basically known, plus or minus. What we need to do as a group is to direct GZA as to the plan that we want to go forward. What do we want to do in the next 3 years? What do we want to do in the next 5 years? What is the town's plan to make this lake a vision of what we want? But we have to keep an outline. We have to get an outline of that in simplistic forms. I hate to say this, not in specific, but in simplistic forms, so we can all participate. It's really impossible for everybody to participate when we start talking about underwater streams and this being part of it and that being part of it, because right now I don't feel that's the most important part of this plan. The plan is, what is the most important thing that we can visualize doing for this lake? What is the most important thing that we can do to make this a healthier lake? Is dredging? Then how do we envision the next 3 years or 5 years or whatever getting to be able to do that so the lake doesn't become a bog? What do we want to do with the herbicides? How does that fit in? How does the harvester fit in? And these organizations want to see a plan, and it doesn't have to be as detailed and as scientific as we think it has to be for a futuristic plan, but they'd like to see what we're thinking and how we're incorporating all of these different things going into the future, 3 years, 5 years, and up to 10 years. Usually a plan 10 years is very difficult to do, but as Roxanne has said many times, it can change. It's a living, or whatever the words you use, Roxanne, it's a changing plan, but for 3 years, it's a roadmap for us to follow that we can all discuss, that we can all agree what is the most important thing facing this lake, what is the biggest perils to the lake going forward, getting together with the SBA, coming to a consensus. This is the plan we'd like to. This part of your plan or the plan might interfere with this plan. How can we all come together to make a vision for the next 3, 5, 10 years? And all that, Roxanne, I apologize. Did you want to say something?
Well, I'll wait until you're done.
I may never be done here. What I'm saying is, rather than make it more complicated with everybody, I think the chair should limit the discussion to a set of rules for this plan. And the plan doesn't have to be complicated. It really does not have to be. We can put complicated stuff in it. But if we start discussing all these complicated stuff without getting an overview of what we want, it's going to be very hard for many of the members to chime in and think about it. So I think an outline, a simple outline of where we want GZA, who's writing this Bible for us for the next 5, 10 years, to concentrate on is important. But I'm saying, let's make a, when I say simple, I mean an outline that we can all look at and say, this is the most important, this is the second most important, and this is the third most important thing that we have to do in the next 5 years. And with that, I rest my case.
I think that he responded to me, and I'd just like to say that.
Well, I didn't respond to you. Oh, I didn't respond to you personally. I responded.
You opened your comments by asking who I was, and I want to say that I totally agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And I apologize for going off the deep end in the, into the, the sex life of the Stockbridge Bowl or whatever it was.
No, I know. I asked who you were because I came in 2 minutes late, so I didn't know who you were. I did not mean to interfere. Really, I didn't. I appreciate everybody's comments, but I really think having run a business, sometimes simplicity goes further than the details. And I could see where Charlie, coming from a science world, I come more from a business world. I want to know the general. There are other people that will do the specifics. But I think we as a group, we're all humans. We're all have different backgrounds. We're not all scientists, or we're not all that. But we all have a vision and a desire to make this like a better place. And we should concentrate in this plan on what will get us there in the next 3, 5, 10 years. And and that's basically it.
Thank you, Michael. Charlie, or Ron, did you have anything to say? Ron?
He left the room.
Roxanne?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on this Zoom meeting we had yesterday. So the participants were Greg Wellenkamp and Michael Nathan, who've been working on the dredging project for umpteen years, GZA representatives, and then we had 2 representatives from NHESP. And so it was Jesse Leddick and it was Misty Ann Merrill. So what I found very interesting and enlightening was NHESP's perspective on what they want to see. And clearly what they would like to see is that we have a lake management and watershed plan in place, and obviously a comprehensive plan. That's going to take time. The other thing that they're concerned about, anytime that we're going for a permit, is they kept repeating that, well, we really have these various projects and we have to be very careful about ongoing concurrent projects. So we have harvesting, we have the herbicide project, and we are working on the dredging project. And so what they talked about was putting together a timeline, and I think that really more has to be in the format of a flow chart in terms of the timelines of these projects. How do they overlap? Clearly this year for harvesting, we had to avoid the areas for the herbicide test and control areas. And we've given them assurances verbally that of course, that's understood that if we have a conflict, but their main concern is any impacts that happen within the bowl. They want to be able to identify what the cause is. And when you have multiple variables, that's problematic. So they want to be very cautious about how we proceed, and they would like it in the form of a timeline. And so I don't think that's a bad idea, I think, for us to be able to put it together as a flow chart, because a lot of these things are up in the air. For instance, the herbicide project, those areas may be redetermined. They may be restructured this coming spring. And that's going to involve the SBA, the Conservation Commission, and the town coming together. They propose where they want them, and then we have to, whether we agree or not, and how the DEP weighs in. So we really don't know what's specifically going to happen, but we can propose, say, okay, if in next year, this is year one of the herbicide project, well, again, where are we going to harvest? How limited is the harvesting, et cetera? And at some point, the dredging project will become hopefully a reality, but that we project that we'd start that in year whatever. We have to look at what the impacts are going to be. And so they're really very serious about wanting to see a comprehensive lake management plan, but in the meantime, be able to get a timeline for how we would play out these various projects and how do we make them not conflict with each other. So I think that might be a task that we need to take on.
Another important thing is funding.
Well, exactly.
I mean, town meeting can, if we're gonna spend 2 million on dredging the bowl, it might get shot down, you just don't know.
Why does it has to be a flow chart?
Yeah.
If this, here's the, prerequisite for each one of these steps. If this happens, one thing happens. If it doesn't happen, it's gone. So I think it has to be kind of a timeline / flow chart for us.
I also think that it's my understanding there are certain things that just will be ongoing in perpetuity, like water testing, harvesting, maintenance around the lake, where dredging are a big project that happens once. That's like an addendum we're not going to dredge every year, every third year. We're going to just do it. And
yeah, but they want to see how these coincide. And
right,
another
of
thing that
course.
Ms. Deanne brought up, which was really, I think, valuable. She said also you need to identify those things because harvesting is not necessarily an ongoing thing according to NHESP, because they may not allow us to do it if something else is going on. For instance, if we were dredging the channel, we're not going to be doing harvesting. You're dredging, you're not harvesting down there. But the things that we do every year, they think we should identify, and that would be the harvesting that we do just prior to the Josh Billings, for instance. Anything that has to do with the ice fishing derby or any other, kind of event that's really important to the town, that we have to make sure that we put that in that timeline, that's going to be important. But they made that point that you may not be able to be allowed to do 2 different projects concurrently. So we have to plan it out that way.
yeah. Ron, did you have anything you wanted to add? You're muted.
Hear me now?
Yes.
I came in a little late. As for Denny, if you want to know where the water comes from in Gould Meadows, I'll tell you where every stream originates. There's one that starts up by Apple Tree Inn, runs right alongside their septic system. Don't ask me why it runs all year, but it does. There's water that comes down from the Saranac property. There's water that originates in Under Mountain Road, that farm up there, the big swamp area. All those areas coming into the north side of the bowl. Some are probably very clear, pure, some probably aren't. My only thought with the whole water system in the Stockbridge Bowl is that everything on the north side and the west side should be on town sewer. That's what goes into tanks, stays in tanks, but the effluent flows underground and eventually gets into the Stockbridge Bowl. If you want to improve the quality of the Stockbridge Bowl, You remove all that effluent that goes into it one way or the other. You can't tear down the houses. You can't do away with the boys' camp or Capallo or the day school, but all those are on septic systems that will or will not, probably will, add to the Stockbridge Bowl nutrient. That should be a priority. It'd be a very expensive priority. I don't know if spending $1 million to dredge the outlet would be a top priority, or what's contributing to the weed growth should be a top priority. That's up for a vote, probably. I know there's some studies that the town's done in the past on tying in the septic, the sewer system with some other areas around the bowl. Maybe that should be explored a little more, or updated anyways. You can mow your lawn as many times as you want, but if you keep adding fertilizer to it, it's going to grow faster. So that's my outlook on this whole thing. I'm not opposed to any other plans, but I think the source has got to be addressed first. So that's my thoughts. I'm in agreement with everybody that the bowl needs work, but my whole thought is start where the major nutrients are going into it, and then control what we can. Hey. Sorry.
Thank you, Ron. Kate, did you want to speak?
Yeah, my comment is about the timeline. My hope is that, Roxanne, you were at the meeting, so my hope is that there's some flexibility built into that, because this really seems like, in many ways, an iterative process. As an example, like, how would you dredge if you don't have data on sedimentation, points of sedimentation around the lake? So it does seem to me like a timeline. It's great to have something that keeps you directed, but it would also be important to approach it with flexibility. And I do think that a lake watershed plan is a really important thing to be prioritizing.
Oh, the timeline, just to clarify, Kate, the timeline is not so much for us. This is for this is the desire of NHESP. This is the kind of information that they want to see when they're looking at any kind of permit that we bring that has to go before them for their approval. So this is coming from NHESP. And so I think it makes sense to try to satisfy their desire for that kind of information. And all of this has to be dynamic because conditions change. And as to understanding sedimentation and so on, I'll let Michael respond to that, because this is a project, the dredging project has been going on for, I think, about a decade now. And Michael can address the kinds of information we already have.
Right.
Kate, I appreciate what you're saying. What we would be from ground, I don't mean to say from ground zero, but all we're trying to do is to remove the silt, which is a biomass, which is 95% biomass of plant life decaying and building up, where the fear is that if we don't take away this silt or part of it or most of it, we're not touching the ground of the lake. We're not changing the lake in any way. We're just removing. It's almost like if you have a fireplace, at one point, you got to get rid of the ash. And it was done because of human error, when the pipes were put in. So the silt has in the last 50 years grown to about 7-8 feet. In many of the places where there's only maybe 2 feet of water, the top of the water to the silt, where before it was 7 or 8 feet. And if we allow it to continue, that whole area may turn into a bog and a wetlands. And once you get to wetlands, you'll never be able to touch it. Kate, your point is well taken, but what we're facing now is one of those rare moments that we can see in the future that if we don't do it now, when we have basically the money and we have the desire and we have the will to fight to get it done, years from now, it will affect the whole lake if the water flow cannot readily go from the main part of the lake through the outlet and wash out. If that whole area is made into a bog, it changes the whole composition of the lake. The temperature, the oxygen, everything will change in the lake over time. So we have a chance now, and usually what happens is things don't change unless there's a crisis that people can see. But truly, those that live around and those that have looked at it, and the DEP itself said that we are getting to crisis mode, and they gave us $675,000 about 7 years ago because they realized what an important project it was to do this. And so I'm looking at it not from a specific today and tomorrow, but I'm saying if we have the chance now to do it and we can financially do it and we can get the permits, now is the time to do it so that this lake doesn't change drastically. And it's for the community. This Stockbridge Bowl, if it becomes a bog and becomes full of vegetation because the waters are just changed and the heat has changed 20, 30 years from now, it's going to have a major economic impact on the town of Stockbridge and on the Berkshires itself. And those are not just coming from my words. That was from the DEP when they gave us the money. They realized the importance, the economic importance, visual beauty, recreational and natural wildlife importance of maintaining this lake as it should have been. We're just taking out something that should have never been in there had the pipelines been done correctly. Pretty much that simple. But thank you, Kate. I appreciate.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there any possibility of the pipelines being redone, or is that just?
So that's a very good question. What happened was, the bottom answer is at this point, no. Because about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the town made an agreement 50 years ago with the Tennessee Gas Company for $68,000 to hold them harmless on anything that went wrong with this thing. In other words, they gave us $68,000 to whatever it is the town wanted to do to fix this issue. And we did nothing. We as a town did nothing for all these years. And we realized at the time that it was such an important project to do, the SBA and the town, and many in the town, in order to keep this thing healthy. So we can't move the pipes. We went underneath. So going to Charlie's point of that, had we gone, Concom had gotten permission from DEP to do the diversion pipe. The DEP had agreed to do the drawdown. Everybody was in agreement at the time. Otherwise, Concom couldn't have given us the agreement to do the diversion pipe if they wouldn't have gotten an okay. So basically speaking, at that time, we were thrown a curve of you can't lower the lake past 2.9 feet, way after we received the okay from DEP and the money from DEP to do this project.
Jamie, can I say something about what's happened?
And I don't mean to get into a back and forth about the diversion pipe.
And
Okay.
also, we'll let Charlie speak, and I think we need to bring it back to what we want to do the next meeting, because we're getting a little off target and off our agenda. But go ahead, Charlie.
All right, so I think that everything that's been said is totally mutually consistent. I don't see any reason for us to think that we're going in any kind of a direction that's differing. So for example, Michael is expressing his sense of urgency for the dredging. Personally, I agree with him 100%. He doesn't want to lose focus on that urgency by discussing other things. I firmly believe that we should educate ourselves as much as possible. But I agree with Roxanne, we need to set up a timeline. And our first goal with the timeline, I think, is to set up, is to put forward what are those things that we need to do now. Now, we already have our harvesting program in place. So we want to continue the programs we have in place. We have our monitoring program. We're looking at the assessment for herbicide, et cetera. What are the things that need to be done right now? What are our top time priorities? Then we'll have other things that we want to discuss, such as what Denny brought up and things like that, that don't have and what Ron brought up, that aren't absolutely essential from a time point of view, that we're also going to put into our timeline framework, but we don't have to discuss them right away. The idea here is, I think we should do what Roxanne said. We need to set up a timeline, but I think the prioritization should be, first of all, don't worry about the timeline for things that aren't important to be done now, but let's look at things like what Michael is talking about, dredging. How are we going to do dredging? I think that we all ought to weigh in on what we think needs to be done right now. I think Michael's made a very effective point that dredging is an urgent matter. It was actually talked about yesterday at a meeting that was going on, and we're in that framework now of putting together the dredging project. And I think that ought to be in the front of our minds, but nothing else that I'm talking about is trying to occlude that or slow it down. Okay, really, I don't want to do that at all. The dredging is one of the top priority things, I believe, if not the. But Roxanne's point is a very good one. Let's get a timeline in place, but right now, let's only deal with the urgent stuff. What do we have to do now, and how do we put that into our timeline now? Then we do our homework. We come back with more understanding of what the nature of the whole thing is over a historical period of time, and we start to expand our timeline into a longer framework. What are we going to be doing 5 years from now? What are we going to be doing 10 years from now? That's how I see it. So the timeline idea is a very good one. Let's look at what are our priorities now, and let's study them, get them in place. We can ask, Courtman's group to weigh in on this. How do we accomplish these and put them together? And then we come back and we look at the other stuff. That's my take on it.
Thank you, Charlie. That was a good one. Anyone else?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that we already have a timeline, or at least we are developing a timeline for the dredging and the harvesting. So we have those things that are prioritizing, and I think Michael made his point very well, that is ultimately the most important thing to do first. But there are other things to be done, and I think that's part of our committee's agenda, is to develop a plan going forward as to what we think the first thing is, the second thing is, the third, the fourth, the fifth going forward. And I think we've hit at all those things. And Ron hit on the nutrients going into the lake and how we're going to deal with that. And I think that we're probably going to have to go back to the water sewer, and we're going to go back to the town and talk about how we can avoid further nutrients flowing into the lake, in addition to those things that Michael has brought up that are very, very important. But I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to sit down and make a plan. And that's what the 2-hour meeting is going to be about.
Exactly.
We should,
Yes, Michael?
I think, first of all, thank you for putting this together. I think we should have an outline of that meeting that should try not to deviate from, if possible. Like, put out what you'd like to see discussed at the meeting in terms of priorities, and maybe give everybody a chance to weigh in, and maybe set a certain amount of time that you can talk or whatever. But I think we can go, I've been at meetings and we can go all over the place, which makes it hard. So if we could keep the next meeting to specifics, it would be great. You may want to go over that with Roxanne and Dr. Kenny or whoever you wish as to what the priorities, but I think discuss it with Roxanne, because she was at this meeting. The NHESP meeting was a very important meeting yesterday, but it really, it was discouraging in many ways for me, having worked on it for so many years, but they want certain things, and part of that is the plan going forward, as Roxanne said, and as Charlie said, what is, they
Michael.
want to see. And it's not just saying what we want to do, but how we want to do it, how it all interacts with other projects. So we may need a I am the representative of the SBA, but the SBA may have to have a meeting and discuss how do we fit in to this whole thing with conflicting projects.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
And Mike Buffoni, did you have any water data from October?
October, we did not get out due to just being so busy.
Okay,
But we did go out last week or the week before.
so November.
Yeah, first week in November, and the water column is thoroughly mixed. We did all our samples, we did 37 samples. All of Brooks tributaries were running. We did all our data collection and sent all the samples off to the lab. And one thing we can do too, looking at all these older reports and all these older studies, I'm sure there's data in there on phosphorus and whatnot. I know the phosphorus that's in the lake now is super, super low. It's way below what we have to put out of our wastewater treatment effluent. So it'll be interesting to see what the nutrient loading was back in the day. I'm sure it was crazy because everybody's discharged from their cottages, everything used to go right in the lake. So it'll be, I can try to put some of that together as well. And maybe with having, do we want to wait a month for another meeting, or do we want to do 2 weeks? And I'll definitely get the document fully, completely read. And I don't know how everybody feels about that, unless we want to wait another month, but.
We've already voted to, we're meeting every third Friday. So it would be December 17th.
Yep.
All right. Any other comments, questions before we adjourn?
I just got one thing.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been in contact with Tom Flannery at DCR, and he mentioned that there were no veligers, no zebra mussel babies found in the lake, and the DNA testing was also done, and it was clean. So we dodged the bullet another year.
Yay. Thank goodness, because we had a lot of boat usage, right? You said it was way up.
What?
A lot of people came to the boat ramp.
We had about 5,900 boats come in this year.
I have one question for Gary.
Oh.
Go ahead.
Gary, did you do a chart like of where people came from this year?
Yeah, I sent it off to Pat. I'll send you a copy.
Would you do that for me? Thanks. Oh, go ahead.
Kate?
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for working on this. It's great to have it in the public realm and be able to sort of, attend a meeting and see and know what's being worked on. So thank you so much. I would make one suggestion, Jamie, if you can ensure that these materials are posted on the town website, I think would be helpful before the next meeting if interested residents can take a look at that information.
Okay, thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I just have one question for Roxanne and or Charlie or anyone else. Is it my experience is that sometimes some of these state agencies can be a little bit siloed. And I'm just wondering what's your sense in terms of NHESP and the DEP working together and their communication? Do you have a sense of that?
I'm not sure what you mean by siloed, but so far DEP actually, when we requested some time ago, Michael Canales and I, we requested some time ago in regard to the harvesting permit, we asked for a meeting. They told us that they just simply didn't have time. So this meeting is my first exposure to either one of them, and NHESP. I thought it was interesting. Our experience in the past has been kind of like moving goalposts, if you know what I mean. The year that we did not get the harvesting permit, the goalposts seemed to keep moving. It may be similar to that here, but I got more of a sense of they were trying to actually communicate to us the kinds of information that they would appreciate seeing, i.e. a timeline, for them to be able to make considerations about permits. And they seemed, to me anyway, I know Michael was discouraged, but I was not as discouraged. I was a little bit encouraged because I really felt that they were trying to share enough of their thought process so that we could actually respond in a positive way. And maybe they get the information that makes them more comfortable in terms of making those decisions. And there did seem to be some willingness to go back and forth with us and have a discussion. And just like Ms. Deanne mentioning, you know, you need to keep in mind those events that you do on an annual basis that are very important for the town, i.e. that race that you do. And I said, yeah, the Josh Billings, and she said, yes. So I was not completely discouraged, and I'm not sure how they are relating to DEP. I know there was a change in, was it Davis Foulis, I think, left DEP? So there's been some change of personnel. But I honestly can't quite answer that, Kate, because I haven't had experience with both of them.
Were they both at the meeting that you were at yesterday or whenever it was?
No, it was just NHESP.
Okay, thank you, Roxanne.
Yep, thank you, Kate.
Can I say something, Jamie, just quickly? And I don't mean to be a prima donna. I had for months something scheduled on the morning of the December the 17th, so I won't be able to be at the meeting on the 17th of December. I'm just saying that I don't mean to be a prima donna.
Okay. That's unfortunate, Charlie, because,
No.
okay. Anything, so can we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I'll second.
And everyone have a happy holidays, Thanksgiving and Hanukkah, and I'll see you the 17th. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, Michael?